Hello again, Dr. Dermot Hudson, Chairman of the Future Ideas Study Group of England, official delegate, Korean Friendship Association with the UK, and President of the Association for Study of Sungan Politics. Here again, I'm going to say a few words about the role of the so-called UN Command in South Korea and the presence of US troops in South Korea. During my recent visit to the DPRK, I had the great honour and privilege to visit the Pyongyang mission of the anti-imperialist National Democratic Front of South Korea, which is known in Korean as Hamminjom. And this is the anti-imperialist resistance organization of South Korea and the vanguard of the South Korean people that fights for reunification and for anti-imperialist independence. It was originally founded as the Revolutionary Party for Reunification in 1969. Its two founding leaders, Kim Jong-tae and Choi Yong-do, were martyred. They were executed by the South Korean puppet fascist regime, a terrible atrocity by the South Korean puppet fascists that we should neither forgive nor forget. Anyway, during my discussions with Pak Sol-chol, the head of the Pyongyang mission of the ANDF, he raised the issue of the so-called UN command in South Korea, which is a ghost-like body. There is really no UN command in South Korea. Is in fact basically just an extension of the US armed forces in South Korea and their tool and mechanism for US rule in South Korea. And in fact, in 1975, the United Nations actually voted to dissolve the UN command in South Korea, but it remained. And to say it's a ghost-like body, we British progressives have particular responsibility because Britain still lends its name to this fraudulent body, which doesn't have a real existence outside of the US Army. Why is it becoming important again to campaign for the dissolution of the UN command? Well, at the moment, within South Korea, there's sort of talk of South Korea supposedly regaining operational control over its armed forces. And I think a lot of people looking at watching this video may not realize that South Korea actually lacks wartime operational control over its armed forces. Yes, that's right. The real control of the South Korean armed forces lays with the US. I mean, this is the reason why we always call it a puppet regime. And for years, the question of fully transferring operational control from the US to the South Korean army has been talked about. And what they've done is they've come up with a very sneaky plan to basically, on paper, relinquish control of the South Korean armed forces, but they will come under the control of the so-called UN command, which, as I said earlier, is basically a tool for US domination, a tool of US neocolonialism in South Korea. So I'd like to sort of take this opportunity to use this video to call for the dissolution of the UN command in South Korea. And it's something that we in UK KFA, in the Sungan Politics Study Association, Future Ideas Study Group, will be campaigning for in the coming months. And meanwhile, in South Korea, the US is trying to put more pressure on South Korea to pay yet more money for the US troops in South Korea. US troops in South Korea are basically parasites living off the South Korean people, because South Korea is foolish enough to give a large sum of South Korean taxpayers' money for the so-called upkeep of the US armed forces, so that the US don't have to pay themselves. And the US is now demanding that amount be increased. This is why on the 18th of October, some progressive and anti imperialist South Korean students bravely entered the residence of the US ambassador in South Korea and occupied it to protest against this outrageous demand for increasing the share of the South Korean taxpayers in paying for the US occupation of South Korea, and also for the end of the US occupation of South Korea. At the moment, there's about 30,000 US soldiers in South Korea. That's 30,000 too many. In fact, even one US soldier in South Korea would be too many. So, you know, the US has to get out of South Korea, it has to withdraw from South Korea. And to say, when we visited the DPRK about a week ago, we saw the continuing tragedy of Korea's division caused by the US when we went down to Panmunjom, and when we couldn't go any further than there because this artificial line, which was drawn by two US colonels using a pencil and ruler over a map of Korea, this artificial line is dividing Korea. There's no geographical or ethnic reason for Korea's division. It's one of the few divided countries in the world, and this must end. So, I mean, I hope you'll lend your ears to our campaign for the dissolution of the so-called UN command in South Korea and the full withdrawal of US troops. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to our channel and come to our events. Thank you. Goodbye.